a husband and wife, to come together, have a family, and through that, we have the expansion of culture. But the heart and soul of our culture is the family. Now, there's some interesting quotes I came across about family. Some of them maybe not so serious. But for those that, at the beginning part and just had a newborn, this one makes sense. 90% of parenting is just thinking about when you can lie down again. And I know for energy-wise, sometimes that's what it feels like. You're just surviving, but it's hang in there. This is a wonderful one. Happiness is having a large, loving, caring, close-knit family in another city. Now, this one I picked out just for my sister. If you don't annoy your big sister for no good reason from time to time, she starts to think you don't love her anymore. Mother-daughter disagreements are, in hindsight, basically mother stating the truth and the daughter taking her sweet time figuring out that truth. The reason grandparents and grandchildren get along so well is that they have a common enemy. Grandparents are there to help their child into mischief they haven't thought of yet, and I can't wait for that. But on a serious side, you don't choose your family. They are God's gift to you, as you are to them. And what can you do to promote world peace? Go home and love your family. Mother Teresa said that. And then St. Augustine said the following: peace in society depends on peace in the family. The importance of developing a strong family, because the enemy is always at the doorstep. The enemy is always trying to get their claws and their hooks into the family, and the importance of a good, godly family, and the need to gain wisdom, the need to gain understanding is so important. Proverbs 11:29 says, whoever brings ruin on their family will inherit the wind. Do not take lightly the responsibility when it comes to your family. And so today we're going to dive into this a little bit. And I know it seems a little weird that I picked the passage I did from Genesis 22, but bear with me a little bit on that, because there is this father-son dynamic played out in that story. It's one we know well, but we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get into that, I want you to take your handouts, you follow along, and we're going to dive into a little bit of why the first statement, it says, parents follow God's leading. And we're going to talk about that in relation to Abraham. But why is it so important that parents follow God's leading? Well, number one is this: they must provide for their family. Parents, your number one, you have the responsibility to take care of your children. God has entrusted you with them, and God has given you the ability and the resources to raise those children. And there's a couple of ways in which we provide for our family. The first is you provide for their physical needs. Until they reach adulthood, obviously, you're not required to care for them for the rest of their life. They have a responsibility to grow up and take care of themselves. But before adulthood, you have the responsibility of providing for their physical needs. The basic needs like food and clothing and shelter. A good education, and I don't mean necessarily a college degree, but a good education. You teach them things. Why? So they can provide for themselves. You are getting them ready for adulthood. What you don't necessarily have to do for your children, and kids are going to hate this one, you don't necessarily have to buy them luxuries. You don't have to give them everything they want. You don't have to buy it just because they say, I need that. Now, it's okay to buy some of those things once in a while, but we have to be careful that we do not spoil our children. They need to learn what the word no means. But what's interesting in the providing for the physical needs of your family is to keep in mind the ultimate goal, which is this: seek God first. You go to Matthew, and it talks about it in Matthew 6:25. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? In other words, Matthew starts out and he's saying, look, don't be so concerned about these basic needs. But he says later in the chapter, after he gives a couple of illustrations, he says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you unto you as well. So yes, it's important we provide for our family. We provide the physical needs of our family, but keeping in mind that the more important thing is to seek God and to seek his kingdom. So physical needs is the first way we provide. The second way is to provide for their spiritual needs. It is so important that we give our children a godly foundation. The first thing it says in Proverbs, is to teach them to fear the Lord. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. It is more important that your children learn to fear the Lord than you make sure that they have all kinds of things to play with. All kinds of toys, all kinds of wealth is irrelevant. More importantly, they need to learn to fear the Lord. And fearing the Lord gives us a couple of things. First and foremost, fearing the Lord gives us knowledge. We've mentioned this verse many times in our study of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So we teach the fear of the Lord so they gain the knowledge of God. Fearing the Lord gives us prolonged life. Proverbs 10:27, the fear of the Lord adds length to life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. The more we teach them to fear the Lord, the more that they will live in accordance to what God wants, and in essence, it will be an extension of life. Does not mean life will be cut short sometimes, but as a general rule, the more we fear the Lord, the longer the life. Fearing the Lord gives us holiness or freedom from sin. Proverbs 16:6, through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided. Teaching them the fear of the Lord teaches them how to obey, how to live a life that is free from sin. And lastly, the fear of the Lord brings humility. Proverbs 22:4, humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. Teaching your children humility. Understanding who they are in God. Understanding the humbleness of knowing how they fall short. That they are sinful, just like us. And that we humbly come before the Lord. Hayden talked last week about blessed are those who mourn. And what do they mourn? They mourn the fact that they are poor in spirit. So we humbly have to bring ourselves before the Lord. And we have to make it right. And we have to deal with the sin and the failure in our life. But that starts with humility. The next thing we provide when it comes to spiritual needs is we teach them, our children, to love. Proverbs 15:17. Better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fatted calf with hatred. So much more important that you instill in your family, in your household, an attitude of love. First for God, that's the first thing. We love God. Mark 12:30, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Every part of your being is about loving God. The next thing is we love our neighbor, and that's family, that's friends, that's our fellow Christians, that's co-workers, etc., etc. It's those in need. As it says in Mark 12:31, the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. But also, Jesus gives special attention to loving our enemies. In Matthew 5, part of his Sermon on the Mount, you have heard it that it is said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Teaching your children not to hate. Teaching your children to take those people in which they struggle with and have them pray for those people. And sometimes the person they hate is their brother or sister, so you got to teach them how to love their brother or sister. A loving home is more valuable to your children than any amount of money you spend on them. It's not about what you can give them financially or monetarily, but it's what you can give them that comes from your heart, which is love. And the third way we provide for the spiritual needs is we provide a safe and peaceful home. Proverbs 17:1. Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. Providing safety, providing peacefulness is so important for your children. They have enough going on when they leave the home. When they go to school, when they go to daycare, when they go wherever they go. And as adults, when they go into the real world. But having a safe and peaceful home where they know anytime they walk through the front door, life is going to be okay. Because they have a mom and they have a dad who care very deeply for them. So the first thing, we provide for the spiritual needs, we provide for the physical needs, and finally, we get into the next part of why it is so important that we follow God's leading is they must discipline their children. Parents, you have the responsibility until they reach adulthood. I no longer discipline my daughters, but I still discipline my son. But what is the proper discipline? How do we discipline? How do we go about it? And I'm not here to debate whether it's right to spank or not spank. That's not what this is about. It's a little different than that. It's where the discipline comes from. Proper discipline is an act of love toward your children. Just as God the Father in heaven disciplines us when we step out of line, we too discipline our children when they step out of line. But it comes from a place of love. Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates the child, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. It is so important that we are correcting our children, not out of anger, but out of love. We want our children to be good, godly people. It takes discipline. And what discipline does, it does a couple of things, as Proverbs says. Number one, it removes foolishness. Proverbs 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. Now, your children will step out of line. The question is, how are you going to gently correct them? How are you going to bring them back into alignment so you can avoid further foolishness? Also, discipline helps protect the child. Proverbs 23:13 and 14, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. No child will die from punishment when done out of love. Now, there is child abuse. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the discipline of a loving parent toward the child. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. Because the more we correct our children, the safer things are going to be for them. Teaching them what is right, teaching them what is wrong. The third thing discipline does is it provides wisdom. A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces its mother. You provide wisdom because you're correcting them. You're showing them the proper way to behave. You're showing them what is right and wrong. And when you don't do that, you will bring shame upon the mother. The fourth thing discipline does, it brings peace and joy to the home. Again, we go back to the safety of the home. Proverbs 29:17, discipline your child and they will give you peace. They will bring you the delight you desire. You do not make friends with your child. You do not bribe your child. You discipline your child. You correct your child so that they do what is right. And when they do what is right, it brings peace and it brings delight and it brings joy to the household. I watched a family one time. They wanted children so bad. And they were unable to have one of their own. So they finally were able to adopt a young boy. And it was wonderful because he was a nice boy. But the problem was the parents lost focus. They so wanted that boy to be happy in their home that they ignored the discipline and kept buying him things, buying him presents, buying him stuff, to the point where they lost complete control of the child. And they had no control over him because they did not take the time to do what is right, which is to discipline the child. Discipline must be timely, appropriate, and always done out of love. Two quick verses there. Proverbs 19:18. Discipline your child, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to their death. And then Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Be very careful when it comes to discipline. Discipline is not there to frustrate your child. Discipline is not there to really just let them know how frustrated you are with them. Discipline is there to correct the behavior that they should not be doing. Never discipline your child when you are angry. Be very careful of that. Because then they're going to see it a whole different way. They're just going to see it, well, mom and dad are mad at me. There are times where I've sent my children to their room and made them wait because I was upset at what they did. Also, too, when you send them to the room without discipline right away, they sweat a little bit because they're going like, well, what are they going to do? But it's important that you are not angry when you discipline your child. Now, I'm not going to say I never disciplined my children when I was angry. I did. I failed in that, and I've had to repent for that. But Julie and I tried in all circumstances to discipline out of love. Because we don't, and by the way, kids, if you ever wonder, your parents don't enjoy disciplining you. It's not fun. But we do it because we love you. And the third thing, you provide, you discipline, and then finally you must train your children. We are given children to train them up. Parents focus on gaining wisdom, not wealth. The first way you train your child is that you yourself are trained. You gain wisdom. Parents need to study God's word. We need to be in the word. Proverbs 24:3-4. By wisdom a house is built. Through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Wealth comes not from the financial gain. It comes from the gaining of the wisdom that comes from the word of God. And if you want to train your child, you need to be in the word yourself. You cannot train them on something you do not know. Parents need to be discipled by other people. It's important that we are learning from other people. Who in your life is challenging you spiritually? Because you need to grow so that you can help your children grow. So it starts off, if you want to train your child, you yourself must gain wisdom. The second thing is that parents live a blameless and righteous life. So the first two ways in which you train your child is things that you do. You gain wisdom and you live a blameless and righteous life. Proverbs 27. The righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are the children after them. When you yourself are righteous, it blesses your children. And thirdly, parents teach their children the wisdom they gain so that their children will live a blameless and righteous life. See, you don't get to the training until you yourself are prepared. So you need to be in the Word. You need to be being discipled by someone who is challenging you in your faith. And then you yourself then turn and give those things to your children. Proverbs 22:6. You all know this verse. Train up the child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. The importance you put on training your children so that later in life, when they get into adulthood, they are ready, they are prepared, and they can stay on the path that God has given for them. Ephesians 6:4, I read the first part of it already. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in training and instruction of the Lord. Teach your children to trust God. Teach them. Train them. Help them gain wisdom. Do not force them to be something they are not. Be very careful with this one. There's a fine line between challenging your children and exasperating your children. Be very careful. Now, I have a son who loves to work with his hands. He wants to be a welder. I am in no way, shape, or form going to be pushing him to be a doctor. It's never going to happen. Even though I'd really like a doctor in the family, so when my health gets worse, I get free medical care. But he's not a doctor. He's going to be a wonderful welder. And same with my other two children. I didn't sit here and plan out their careers for them. I let them find their way. I gave them advice along the way. I helped them the best I could. But it's important that we do not exasperate our children, forcing them into things that they just don't know how to do or don't want to do. We have to be very careful. What's important, though, is that we train them in the Word of God, and we teach them, and we help them trust God, and we help them seek God, and we help them live godly lives. So in the case of Abraham, when it comes to following, right, all the way back, I said the first thing parents do is follow God's leading. Let's dive into this Abraham for a little bit. And let's talk about it. And we start off in Garth read the passage in Genesis 22, and the very first thing, a little context behind this is to understand that, God made Abraham a promise way back in chapter 12 of Genesis. He said, look, I'm going to make you a great nation. And then he reaffirms it by saying, I'm going to give you a son. Even though Abraham is a really old man, he says, I'm going to give you a son. And even though Sarah and Abraham tried to make a child for themselves by giving, Sarah gave her servant to Abraham, and they had a child, Ishmael, and it caused all kinds of problems. But in essence, that wasn't God's plan. And so God visits them in their old age. Abraham is pushing 100. Sarah is pushing 90. And the visitors come and they say, hey, within a year, Sarah's going to give birth. And of course, Sarah quietly is laughing to herself. But sure enough, within a year, Isaac is born. And now it says in Genesis 22, verse 1, it says, sometime later. So little Isaac is grown up. We think he's, 15, 16, 17, in those teenager years, those fun years where your kids are so wonderful, never rebel, never talk back to you. The great age of being a teenager, right? And so he's a teenager, most likely. Abraham is pushing 120. And so God decides to test Abraham. And the test is simple. God says, give me back your son. Wow. That's a test. But God is really seeking to know if Abraham truly trusts God more than anything. So this is what God said. He said, take your son, and he emphasized it, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. That's a test. That is an unbelievable test. And the interesting thing about Isaac, his response is immediate. In verse 3, it says, early in the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. The next morning, immediate obedience. Never questioning it. Never questioning the fact that this is probably the last child Abraham can have because he's pushing 120, and at this time, 120 is old. It's not at the time back in Genesis 5 where they were living till they were about 800, 900 years. This is the time now where they're dying in their early hundreds. So he's at the end of his life, and God has made these promises, and Isaac, his only son, he's being asked to give back. But he gets up, and he goes. And they travel, and they get to the place where God tells them to go. And it says in verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. He himself carried the fire and the knife, and the two went on together. That is what he is modeling to his son. God has told him what to do. And he tells his son, we are going to get up. We need to go make a sacrifice. God is going to lead us to a place. And so this is a guy who's provided for his son. This is a guy who has disciplined his son. This is a guy who has trained his son. This is a guy who has put time into his son. And now he is modeling for his son the importance of following God's commands. And they're headed up the mountain. And now we turn to the children. Children obey while at home and honor their parents. That is for a lifetime. Why is it so important that children are obedient and honor their parents? It's simple. So they will learn and receive blessing. Ephesians 6, 1-3. Children, obey your parents. That is the only thing you are given as a child to do, is to obey your parents. But he goes on, children, obey your parents in the Lord. So it's important. You know, your parents are trying to lead you away from the Lord. Yeah, okay, maybe you don't have to listen. But in the Lord, your godly parents, you are to obey them. For this is right. Honor your mother and father, which is the first commandment with a promise. And that promise is in verse 3, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Children, you are to obey your parents. That's it. And in doing so, there will be blessing. You will find enjoyment. You will find peace. You will enjoy a long life. Because as you listen to your parents and they guide you on the right path, you are going to be a person God truly loves. I don't mean love, but trusts to do his work. But here's the thing to always remember. Children, you have the right to ask questions. My kids, when they got older, now when they were younger, they didn't get to ask questions because when they were younger, they didn't understand. You know, I've given this illustration before. Anytime we walked in the Walmart parking lot, all three of my kids thought it was a playground. And they just wanted to run. And I'm grabbing their hand, and they hate it, and they're pulling, they're tugging, they're trying to do everything. I said, just walk with me. They don't understand that cars are there to flatten them. What they understand is it's a big open space to play in. But when they're older, my kids were allowed to ask questions. And it's okay to ask questions. Now, sometimes I had to tell them, I can't answer it now, you just have to trust me and we'll talk about it later. But for the most part, I did explain to the best of my ability why I did what I did, and they've always been able to ask questions. And that's what Isaac does. They're walking up the hill now, and they're going up, and Isaac has been trained by his father. He understands how to sacrifice. He understands what it takes to make sacrifices. We have the wood. We have the fire. But he asks a simple question, where's the lamb for the sacrifice? Like I said, he's been trained by his father to worship God. He's been trained how to make a sacrifice, how to worship God. Where is it? And Abraham's answer is simple. God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. My son and the two of them went on together. The lamb was Isaac. And Abraham had not revealed this yet. But the thing that's interesting, you may ask questions, but ultimately, children need to obey and honor their parents. Because that's what Isaac does. You go to verse 9 of Genesis 22 at the very end. He says, Abraham bound his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Now, you need to understand something. There's a distinct difference between Isaac and Abraham. And at this point, it's pretty clear that Isaac is probably a little stronger than his father. Or at least he's able to squirm a little bit and make it difficult. But look what he does. He allows his father to place him on the altar. It's starting to sink in what's going on, and Isaac still is obedient to his father. As I said, Jacob, somewhere late teens, maybe early 20s, and Abraham is pushing 120, maybe a little older. Now, at this point, John can't take me yet, but give it another 10 years, and I'm going to be saying, yes, sir, a lot. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. But he's going to be stronger than me one day. I'll be 90. He'll be 50. I'm just seeing if he reacts, but he didn't. You pay attention there? He's smiling. He goes, but in his mind, he thinks he can take me now. But eventually, I will not be stronger than him. And at this point, Abraham probably isn't stronger than Isaac. So Isaac has to be willing. And he has to allow himself. I think it's interesting. Isaac's obedience is a great picture of what Jesus did for us. You all know that Jesus at any point could have stepped away from what happened. He could have called a legion of angels to free him, a legion of angels to protect him. But he allowed himself to go to the cross. He allowed himself to be beaten, to be ridiculed, to be nailed to the cross. He allowed all our sin to be put upon him, so much so that his father could not look upon him anymore. He allowed himself to take all that wrath for all our disobedience, for all our wrongs, for everything that we have done against God, and the price that we were to pay. Jesus took it all. And he did it willingly. The Romans didn't force him on that cross. He allowed himself to be placed there. The obedience of the Son to the Father. Children, obey your parents. Obey your parents. Now, I know everybody can come up with these crazy examples of what if my parents asked me this, or what if my parents... That's not what this is about. You have good parents. If you have godly parents, they're not going to ask you to do things that are wrong. The last thing, as the story wraps up with Abraham and his son, is this: families worship God. The moment of truth has come for Abraham and Isaac. Would Abraham really go through it? Would he really plunge the knife in? So again, Abraham prepares the altar. Isaac willingly laying on it. Then it says in verse 10, he reached out his hand, took the knife to slay his son. I want you to picture that. I gotta believe that just tears coming down Abraham's face as he raises the knife. And I know you've got this innocent, as a teenager, I don't know how innocent, no, I'm kidding. This teenage boy looking up at his father as he's raising the knife. Two people were being obedient. And then it happens just before the knife comes down. The angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham! Can you imagine how relieved he was when he heard his name? Ooh. Yeah, here I am. And you got anything new? Please tell me. And it says in verse 12, do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. I mean, Abraham, the faith that this man had, this is the first time he's shown great faith. I mean, packing up and leaving his homeland and going, and just, God says, pack up and leave, I'll tell you when to stop, was basically the trip that he got from the very beginning. So Abraham packed up and he started traveling until God told him to finally stop at some point. And he does it here again, and he shows his faith, and the Lord knows that he is number one. Isaac is not. Because Abraham understands the importance of Isaac to the overall promise that God made to him way, way, way back years ago, about 25 years earlier, where God says, I will make you a great nation. I will make your descendants as great as you can count. And I will give you a land for your people. And Isaac is the whole linchpin to the plan. He's the boy. He's the one. So the great faith he had to lay that boy on the altar. And it says afterwards, Abraham looked up, it says, and in the thicket saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over, he took the ram, sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. And what a moment it was for the two of them. As they sat there, they prepared that sacrifice, and as they worshiped their God in heaven. Families worship God together. Now, granted, we live in different cities, but we worship when we can as a family. You need to be sure that you, as fathers of the family, are making sure that you are in the house of the Lord to worship, not just on Sunday, but every day of the week. It is not just today that we worship. We get up every day and we worship God. I'm going through a book by A.W. Tozer about worship, and he said, the number one thing we're created to do is worship God. Therefore, the number one thing we should be doing is worshiping God. And that's what the Father and the Son do. They worship their God. And then they head back down the mountain and head home. Now, I got to believe that at some point, as they're walking down the hill, or mountain, I should say, because I've said this a few times to my kids, don't tell your mother. I'm sure he said that one. No, I'm kidding. But they walked down, and there had to be this peace with the two of them. There had to be this incredible bond because they shared something unbelievable. Together, two men went up that hill and were obedient to God, and then on the way back down, they were rejoicing and praising their God because of their obedience. So for you guys, I have a few questions to wrap up with. For you siblings, I didn't say much about siblings, and that's okay, but siblings is important. Do you love your siblings? Do you help when needed, or if needed? Sometimes we can overhelp. Do you connect with your siblings? Are there any siblings you need to mend a relationship with? For parents of children at home and of adult children, do you follow God's leading? Do you follow God's leading? Are you leading your family in the way God wants you to go? Number 2, do you live a godly life? You parents, you better be living what you're trying to teach your children. C, how do you provide for your children? Now, my adult children are provided for differently than my son that's still at home. I do not feed and clothe my adult children anymore. They're big people with jobs, and they buy their own food, they buy their own clothes. But I still provide. I still provide advice when they ask. I don't force them to take it. That's not my place, but I'm there if they have questions, and I'm there still to provide spiritual leading. But it's different. It's different when they become adults. Number 4, and this is for parents with children still at home. How do you discipline your children? Do you do it out of anger? Do you do it out of love? Like I said, I don't care if you do spankings, timeouts. I don't care what your punishment is. That's your decision as a couple. Just make sure the two of you agree. But do you do it to correct your children? Do you do it because you love them? Not because they're driving you nuts. For you children that still live at home, listen up. Number 1, do you honor and obey your parents? Now, I know there are days you don't like your parents, okay? But do you honor them? Do you obey them? I know even the days you don't like them, you still love them. Number 2, do you follow your parents' godly example if it's available? Now, I know not all children have godly parents to look up to. But if you do, you are a blessed person. Now, for you adult children, I'm going to spend a little time with you. Do you honor your parents? Just because you're an adult doesn't mean you stop honoring them. In fact, sometimes it gets more difficult because there comes a point, which is my third question, do you care for your parents as they get older? There comes a point where that honor switches to where you need to care for them. And that is the last way you honor your parents, is as they get older, you help them. And I know for some of us parents, we don't like the fact that there's going to come a time where we're going to have to listen to our children. I've told my kids, I'm going to be I think I'll be pretty okay, except when they try to take my car away. I said, they're probably going to have to steal and hide the keys, the car, and everything else. What? Yeah, steal my glasses, I can't drive. But do you honor your parents? The second question I go back up to is this: do you live a godly life? Whether you have a family of your own or not, you adult children, do you live a godly life? And the last question is for all: do you worship with your family? Do you worship with your family? Sometimes you get to do it once a year when they come home for the holidays. Sometimes you get to do it every Sunday. But whenever you get to do it as a family, enjoy it and consider it good. For you kids that are still at home, enjoy the time you get to go to worship with your parents, because it doesn't last forever. There comes a time where you grow up, you move on. So enjoy the fact you can come to church and worship with your parents. We're going to come to the table now, and we're going to celebrate communion. And we are going to have a time of celebration as we come and remember what Jesus did on the cross. As I did earlier, I told you what Isaac did by laying himself on the altar is a foreshadowing of what Christ did on the cross. And so we're going to come, we're going to partake of the elements, and we're going to remember. Now Merlin's going to come and play. And as he comes to play, may we take time to pray. Prepare our hearts. And remember, as it says in Corinthians, it says, if you have something you need to deal with a brother, don't partake of communion, but go and make it right. But if you are ready, prepare yourself to come to the table. Go ahead, Merlin.